guest today is Ed Kociela. Ed has been a newspaper reporter and a writer for years, and he is a wealth of some staggering information. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Rebecca. I think you want to talk a little bit about polygamy, right?
We sure do, because I know that you're an encyclopedia. Polygamy today is changing, or is it? That's the question.
The state of polygamy remains the same as it has been for decades and decades and decades. There's very little that is taking place to combat the horrors that are occurring out on the Utah-Arizona state line. We see them, as a matter of fact, working to enact even further legislation, as there's a bill today, as we speak, before the Utah legislature that would pretty much help the polygamist groups to dodge any sort of legal action. It's called a religious freedom bill, and what it's working on is basically we've had a situation where, as you well know, not long ago, we've seen how the community out there in Short Creek has employed young men, little boys, to go out and pick pecans, to pick fruit out in the farms. Underage, no compensation, when they should be in school.
Ed, I want to clarify the word employed. They worked them, but they didn't pay them. Is that not correct?
That is correct. They are not paid. Employed slave labor, if you will. What has happened is that the courts have tried to look into this, and they're trying to find some kind of a violation, which is obviously there. But when they brought people in to testify, because one of the witnesses that they had subpoenaed had protested, the judge ruled that the witness did not have to answer questions that were secretive or that would reveal too much inside information regarding the religion. The witness argued that as a religious freedom, he didn't have to disclose church doctrine, church policy, church actions, church activity, that he did not have to speak to the court and address these issues. So there is a law that is in the developmental stage with the Utah legislature at this moment to protect that sort of thing. It really does need to be a right, a guarantee. But there is also the human dignity, the human protection of these children who are being forced out into the fields when they should be in school to go and pick fruit, to pick nuts, to work in the shops, to work in the little factories that they have out there. So there's a give and take that is not taking place. And again, the Utah legislature seems to be protecting the polygamous cult out there.
Well, the concept that they were willing to protect the religion and not the people in it is kind of strange, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. You know, the rights the rights that we all have and share are guaranteed. However, when the rights infringe upon others' rights, when they can cause physical, emotional damage to somebody else, they can violate another person's rights. Your rights stop. You cannot scream fire in a crowded theater. Okay. You cannot do so. You may have the right to free speech, but you cannot endanger somebody or jeopardize their rights or harm them in any way, mentally, physically, spiritually, or whatever, because of your beliefs.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because it's okay to marry a child bride or send her to eternal destruction if she doesn't comply. And it's okay to put a young man into slavery for God without compensation or damnation and loss of his family. But it's not okay to discriminate against a religion that enforces that.
True, absolutely. And it's really not a form of discrimination. I mean, it is a legal process where they are asking what took place out in those fields. Were there children out there who should have been in school? Were there children out there who were 8, 9, 7, 6 years old picking these fruits and vegetables and nuts who were not being compensated, who were being worked long, hard hours in the field with nothing in return, with no thought to their personal safety. You know, you get out into these agricultural areas, and there are a lot of things that happen. We saw that with the 14-year-old boy about a year ago who was driving a forklift, overturned it, and died. It was in violation of all OSHA and safety regulations in the state of Arizona and in the federal government. However, nothing occurred. The boy was driving a forklift on a public road, overturned, and died. Nobody has done anything about that.
Human rights should not be sacrificed in the name of religion. What are we going to do? Go back to jumping virgins in the volcano?
Well, you know, this all boils down, Rebecca, into a human rights issue. We see little girls forced into marriage with older men. We see young boys who are placed into hard labor. Believe me, that's hard labor they do out there, building trusses, working on construction sites, picking the fields, working in very hard labor situations. We see women whose rights are abridged, who do not have because of their religious affiliation, because of the repression that takes place within the community. They do not have the opportunity to express themselves, to live within the rights that are guaranteed them under the Constitution. They do not have equality out there. If you are an outsider, and there are several instances of lawsuits that are taking place as we speak before the Department of Justice, that you are an outsider, you are not treated equally. You will pay more if you are allowed to come into the community. You will pay more for your rent. You will pay more for your electrical bills, which, by the way, proceeds from the local water company out there, we have learned recently, have gone to the FLDS church. The local water company is a municipal company. Profits from the company, however, have been transferred to the FLDS church.
How can that be?
The man writes a check, hands it over to Warren Jeffs.
Whoa.
That's a public utility. And the money has gone from the people who pay their bill to the church, whether you are a member or not.
And if you're an outsider, you pay a lot more.
Absolutely.
That's the way to keep outsiders out.
Within the structure of Short Creek, you know, they're not welcoming, if you will, to outsiders. As you enter the Hilldale, Utah or Colorado City, Arizona sides, there are the town marshals sitting at the city limits. And a strange car or a vehicle of any kind that comes into that area is immediately picked up and tagged and followed by the town marshals, the so-called Warren Jeffs God Squad. And they will tail you through town. They will run your license plate, and they make no effort to disguise it. You will see them in your rearview mirror on the microphone running your license plate to see who you are. I had reporters who would go in to cover events, meetings, things that happened out in that community, park their cars and come back, and they'd be covered in mud. Other reporters have talked about having their tires slashed or their windshields broken.
I went on a TV program right after that visit to Dianne Feinstein's office and was very happy the God Squad had finally been marked as being wrong, and then a judge overturned it. Update us on that.
The God Squad in Short Creek is still very operational, Rebecca. We had a recent situation where a gentleman who was excommunicated from the church for no apparent good reason had a daughter with Rachel Jeffs, who was one of his spiritual wives and happens to be Warren Jeffs' full sister. The girl is 17 years old. She disappears for 11 years. The father has been trying to find her. He recently received a phone call from a Washington County Sheriff's detective who said, "We have located your daughter." She is living in a trailer in Hilldale, Utah. There's no water. There's no electricity. The only power that comes into the trailer is an extension cord from a neighboring house. She goes to her neighbors once a week to wash her clothes, occasionally to shower or bathe. She received her food from one of the bishops who was watching over her, a box of food to last her a week, and those were the conditions she was living in. The detective said, "Would you like us to put you back in contact with your daughter?" The man said yes. There was a meeting. The man, who has since remarried, and his new wife met with the girl. They were working on a reconciliation, getting back together, because it had been 11 years since they had been together. The FBI was involved because it was a possible kidnapping case. FBI advised the man that the best thing he could do was to go into hiding. They left. They went into Southern California, where they took a short vacation, where they got to visit with each other, where they got to reconnect after 11 years of being apart. What happened at that point is that the man, a guy named Ron Robach, came back. He and his wife and his daughter, they spent some time in San Diego. They spent some time up in the LA area. On their way back, they stopped in the community of Mesquite, Nevada, which is about 40 miles from St. George. Stopped at a store. The man's wife went into the store. The man was in his vehicle with his daughter when this Ford F-350 pulls up into the parking lot. Gets in the parking lot. Girl recognizes the vehicle, goes up to tell them she doesn't want to be a part of the community any longer. It's snatched into the vehicle, and she has been gone. They don't know where she is. They don't know if she's been taken to Colorado, South Dakota, to Montana, Idaho, Western Canada, or even to one of the facilities that they have in Mexico.
So she is being held in a religion, basically, as we know, as a breedable slave for time and all eternity. And that's okay with the United States government because it's freedom of religion.
Yes, the FBI, as I said, when they were talking to the man, the father, said the best thing you could do is basically go into hiding, get away.
The FBI said to hide.
Yes. No protections. The one help in this was that a Washington County Sheriff's Office deputy spent 11 years and finally found the girl. Yes. And reconnected her with her father.
Right.
It's the one example of law enforcement actually stepping in and doing something in recent times that we know of. You know, Rebecca, getting back to your question about have things changed, no. Another example of how things have not changed is that the state of Texas has approved parole for Merrill Jessup, 79 years old, who was part of the FLDS clan that went from Short Creek to the El Dorado compound,
right,
which raided and where the charges came against Warren Jeffs and 11 other men. The man was part of that bunch that went to jail. He is now going to be paroled. What makes it even more bothersome, more disturbing, is that Merrill Jessup is the one who married Warren Jeffs to the 12-year-old that Warren Jeffs was prosecuted over. And the 12-year-old was Merrill Jessup's daughter.
That is so pathetic.
In exchange, Merrill Jessup received in marriage one of Warren Jeffs' daughters. Parole has been granted.
Parole has been granted because?
They got to Texas. I don't know. It makes no sense.
And the horrible thing you and I know about this is these men then come forward as martyrs to God.
He was supposed to be in jail for a minimum of 10 years. He only served 6.
My father went to prison in 1944. He had a child bride. And from that day forward, he was a martyr to God. You know, not a pedophile, a martyr to God.
So you ask if things changed, if things improved. No.
So the God Squad's still alive and well.
God Squad is still alive and well. The Attorney General's office, even though Mark Shurtleff and John Swallow are facing serious charges and will probably end up in prison, has still not taken the steps necessary to enforce the state's bigamy laws. And the legislature continues to dig up, create new laws to protect these people.
The thing that is so terrifying about it is when they get away with this, it usually amps up their cruelty. Is that happening?
I don't know for sure. I couldn't tell you exactly, but you know, a leopard doesn't change its spots. The procedures, the things that happen out there, I'm sure continue to escalate and make life unbearable and horrible for the people under war and justice.
I saw some video and read some articles on the internet where allegedly the God Squad actually had run people off the road and created accidents. Are you aware of that?
Well, it's a typical thing, as I said, when you enter Short Creek from either the Utah or the Arizona side, the official police, the town marshals, are there with their vehicles parked alongside the road. Now, the God Squad goes beyond the 6 or 7 full-time employees for the town marshal's office. There are also the men in town who volunteer, if you will, who patrol the area on their own in their big heavy-duty trucks. And they come up, and I know this because it happened to us. They come up and they tail you. They're there. They make their presence known, and they're on their cell phone the whole time talking about where you're going, what you're doing, what your vehicle looks like, where you are, what you're looking at, the whole time. It's very intimidating. They've all got these huge, huge trucks. Big wheels are lifted. They're heavy-duty trucks, and they intimidate you. They follow you. They get right up on your bumper. They're there. And they make no mistake about it. Side windows are all deeply, deeply tinted, so you can't see in. You can see in your mirror through the front windshield. You can see them in there, and you can see what they're doing. And they make no bones about it. They're on their cell phones talking to people. They're following you. They want to know. We drove around the Warren Jeffs complex, and we actually were being tailed by one of these vehicles. We experienced some of that ourselves last time we were in the Short Creek area. There are a lot of incidents where people do end up in terrible accidents out there that, yeah, you know, they're run off, they're chased, they're intimidated, they're driven away from the area. They do not want outsiders coming in to see what's going on.
The people that turn their back, the people in authority, the law, the government, the cops, the legislator, the FBI, the people in political power that turn their back on this have to have a reason. So there's only one of 2 reasons. Number 1, they don't really understand it. Or number 2, they're getting a benefit by turning their backs on this.
Utah is a theocracy. It still holds its roots in the fundamentalist Mormon church. The original precepts of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young still apply. Maybe with a nudge and a wink, maybe in quiet reserve, but they still apply. The concept, even though the church banned plural marriage, it still believes in it. And in the afterlife, you have your multiple wives, and you live the principle in the afterlife and create these little spirit babies for the remainder of eternity. The acknowledgement of women's rights in the state of Utah is abysmal. The protections for children are abysmal. You do not see the reporting the arrest of domestic violence abusers or child abusers in the proportion that it should be, because they turn a blind eye because of the original precepts of the Book of Mormon and the revelations of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. It is embedded within the culture and the community, and there is no escaping it. It is all about what is handed to them through the theocracy. The state of Utah is looking now. They have had a couple of more progressive legislators who have tried for several years to establish a law for equality among same-sex couples, among the LGBT community. It has gone nowhere. Recently, however, the LDS Church came forward with another revelation saying, basically, live and let live, and people from the LGBT community are welcome within our church as long as they don't practice their inclinations. The move was made for no other reason other than to tone down the rhetoric and to stop the criticism of the church position on LGBT people.
What do you think that we can do to educate the public to stand up from our grassroots and demand their rights?
There have been many efforts, Rebecca. People have gone into the community, holding out help, Sandra Toole, and all of her wonderful people. You know, some friends of ours who are activists go into the community and they try to educate and they try to protect and they try to help those who wish to get away escape. The problem is that this has been so imbued in the culture here that it is impossible to erase. It just will not go away. The only thing that can happen is that the population needs to shift. It's still a 60-65% Mormon base. And the people who come into Utah are even more heavily weighed into a conservative political mindset, which is not terribly understanding of the pressures and the abuses that go on. They're not extending or realizing the depth of the repression of the women, the abuse of the children, the fraud that takes place, as you all know, the bleeding of the beast. You know, there just isn't an awareness or a willingness to attack the problem.
Define the bleeding of the beast for our listening audience.
Bleeding of the beast dates back to when Utah was seeking statehood. Because of the principle, the practice of plural marriage, the federal government had enacted several laws banning the practice. Utah was applying for statehood when Brigham Young went to Washington, D.C. to lobby on behalf of Utah to become a state. Part of the deal was, want to be a state, give up this polygamy thing. There was almost an instant revelation that polygamy was bad and that they would give up the practice, that they would excommunicate those who were a part of it, although many were, as you would say, grandfathered in, who, you know, already had numerous spiritual wives, if you will. And it created a very large resentment towards the federal government. So in payback, retribution for their anger at a federal government that they thought had tried to completely undermine, cut the underpinnings of their church, they had taken to the practice of what's called bleeding the beast, which means that they are living off of federal welfare funds, that Medicare, Medicaid, all of the different kinds of welfare that are available, they try to seek in as many ways as possible. That's why you have the situation where you have all of this money pouring into a community, but not directly into the hands of the people, because the money then becomes communal in a way. It goes into the businesses, it goes into the church leaders' pockets. Very few make good money out there. Almost most of them make $0 because it's all done on chits. You get your house free. You know, some people get a little bit of walking around money, and then the elders, of course, split the pie, getting 90% of it. But it's the situation where it's allowed to prosper, it's allowed to grow, and the just as an example, a family out there where a man has 5 spiritual wives and each wife has 5 children is taking down in federal and state welfare and benefits more than $13,000 a month.
Well, and that isn't even counting what goes into the community. What they get from government funds for roads and schools and radio stations and post offices and.
Yeah, they had a beautiful, lovely elementary school out there. Brand new desks, brand new classroom equipment, books, all of it. And it became a weed patch because the kids were pulled out of school, out of the public school system, and homeschooled at the order of Warren Jeffs.
They're really not educating the kids, but they're taking all the government funds for educating the kids.
Yes. Yes.
Kids come out of there that can't even read, don't they, Ed?
Well, that's a huge problem. What they call the lost boys. It's the young men who are removed from the community because in many instances they happen to be young men and there aren't enough women to go around for the elders and the older men to build their stable of spiritual lives. They're tossed out.
Thank you, Ed Kociela, for your beautiful, wonderful educational talks to us. I want to thank you even more for what you write. Please keep educating the public. I'm your fan, and there are a lot of other people that will remain your fans. So thanks so much for what you do.
Thank you, Rebecca.